We move to this now. Alarming revelations concerning a human trafficking ring linked to South African nationals in Israel this time has come to light earlier in August. Now, this after Israeli authorities successfully dismantled the operation in both Jerusalem as well as Tel Aviv. According to the women, they were drawn to Israel by way of Jordan and traveled with documents that classified them as pilgrims. Let's unpack this further with the crime expert Calvin Rafadi. Mr. Rafadi, a pleasure to have you on the program this evening. Can you give us a quick overview of human trafficking in the country, in South Africa? How does it compare to other regions?
Good evening, Kanta. The comparison of this particular horrific crime, what we can call it, human traffic criminality, is a real cancer in our country. And what we can say is that we are not in a military coup or any military dispute. We are in a democratic country, but indeed it does take place a lot here in South Africa. And a lot of our women, more especially, and kids, they are recruited, into participating in certain job interviews or recruitment, whereby they end up seeing themselves as being human trafficked. So there are labor brokers acting as labor brokers, one can say. They are agents for the big fishes, whereby they lure our people into believing that they will get job opportunities, especially with a high number of unemployment, and then they end up being victims of being human trafficked.
I find that quite interesting, Mr. Rafadi, because this recent Israeli rescue of South African women tells us about the international aspect of trafficking involving South Africans this time. Maybe expand a bit more on that.
Yeah, so basically what happens is, this particular so-called agent for these guys who are into human traffic, they look for certain features, especially women, whereby they are into modeling or they can participate into some of their nightclubs where they want to take them to go and operate. And I'll give you one incident whereby, we once rescued a lady down here in Cape Town, whereby she thought as a modeler that she received some job opportunity as being one of the waitresses in one of the hotels. Upon arrival, they drugged this particular woman, and then once we recovered that she was working at a particular brothel, and then we were told that no, she owes them 250, and for us to release her, we had to pay the 250, or else she's not going to be released. So those are type of typicals whereby women are lured and are actually trafficked in most of other certain European countries.
Another incident reported recently, the 90 Ethiopian migrants who were found in Johannesburg. It does highlight how vulnerable other Africans in the diaspora are to trafficking. What factors contribute to their vulnerability, if you will, and how should South Africans address this issue?
Yeah, I didn't hear your question very properly, but what one can say that we need enough effort to tackle these particular crimes. And what we can say to our ladies is that, they mustn't speak to strangers or even believe that some other job opportunities without them verifying them, doing proper due diligence that indeed they do exist. So we realize that some are even, we realized that in one of the malls, especially around Pretoria, where there's a particular group that will shake hands with a stranger, and then they use a particular jelly format called melatonin. And once that happens, the lady will feel dizzy, and then she can easily be pulled into the vehicle and be human trafficked. So those are some of the measures that we need to look at. But what we can say is that, we realize that there are a lot of other foreign nationals that, were apprehended in around Benoni, the last raid that we saw.
Yeah,
and then the modus operandi of those is that, you find them around the areas of where there's international airport, like your Benoni, Kempton Park, Bruma, Observatory. They live in high walls, and then they are scattered in one house. But, they are only released at a particular fee to go and do cheap labor. So those kind of males is that they actually want to be human trafficked because of the countries where they're coming from, the poverty or the war. So most of them, they will opt to be human trafficked to come this side. That's why even when they are rescued, you find them as sober as they are. They are not even intoxicated or even given a particular drug. So they are as sober as they are because they know what is happening. They gave consent. It's just that when those type of houses, there's a big fuss, it's because of there's a business dispute between some of the, the big cartels. They will tell on the police that, such a particular house is harboring such human trafficking. And that's why you see a lot of success, because of once they fight for theft or disputes, and then they reveal such homes.
Now, for us to better understand these trafficking operations in South Africa, what other methods do traffickers commonly use to exploit their victims?
Yeah, so in most essence, like we say that, they camouflage. Some you even find them online, whereby, they can recruit you online. And then once you fall victim in meeting them, and then they promise you business opportunities or even job opportunities. And some, they even go as far as, forcing the victim, getting into the vehicle, and then once they kidnap them and then they human traffic. But again, also we mustn't, forget the point that, some are even human trafficked to a point that most of their organs are, sold. So there is a business also into that particular issue, whereby most of our kids, they go missing, they are human trafficked, and at the end of the day, certain organs in their body are being taken out and sold to this masterminds.
You keep mentioning children, Mr. Rafadi. What are the biggest challenges that South Africa is facing in really combating child trafficking? And what protections are in place for these children?
Yeah, I guess as parents, we need to be aware on what our kids are up to on social media, because there are certain chat rooms whereby, that's where there's a lot of trafficking of this human trafficking issue. There are so-called chat boxes whereby, our kids can be recruited there, and then they can be, part of being these monsters to take advantage of them. So as parents, we need to monitor our kids, to know the whereabouts of our kids, and even monitor the social media, like we say.
But what role do law enforcement and international groups like Interpol play in tackling human trafficking? And in your view, how effective are these efforts?
Well, I guess such efforts is that they make a lot of awareness, and where there is arrest, they do take, they do take part of such arrest. There are people who are on their radar and on wanted list of this particular gangs of human trafficking. But like we say, it's very, very difficult, especially like we mentioned that they stay in high walls, and it's not easy for even us, the community, to understand what is behind a particular home or behind the wall. But it does take place, and then the police, obviously, once they get information, they communicate with Interpol, and some are found that they are even grey listed or wanted on the Interpol list. But the big fishes, they recruit a lot of agencies to play this part on their behalf.
From what you've observed, what are the main weaknesses, specifically in South Africa's current strategy against human trafficking, and how can it be improved?
Yeah, in South Africa, we've got a problem with our borders, one can say. And also another problem that we're sitting with is that the so-called Lindela Repatriation Center, whereby a lot of foreigners, once they are found, even those who are human trafficked, they are being taken to those facilities. And there's a lot of corruption. That's why we call upon, the organized crime to conduct lifestyle auditing on some of those officials, because it is alleged that some are even released that site on a fee, or there's an exchange of another human to another one, whereby the other one doesn't even have papers. And also that asylum seekers, there's a lot of loopholes there, whereby a lot of people who are human trafficked or the mastermind, they use those platforms and they use those opportunities, and that's why it's full of corruption there.
But we do know South Africa to be a country that's plagued by high unemployment and joblessness, even poverty as well. How does this contribute to human trafficking, South Africa's socioeconomic situation?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of, like we say, you know, when it comes to cheap labor, most of the people who are human trafficked, they come here to perform cheap labor. And in line of doing that, there's a lot of criminal activities, like your counterfeit clothes, SIM card which are pre-record, illicit trade of cigarettes. So those who are human trafficked, most of the time, once they arrive here and they conduct such cheap labors, they don't even report to the authorities. And then, you know, there's a lot of crime behind that. And we've seen that, especially in downtown Joburg, your Cleveland, your Mayfair area, you know, you get cheap counterfeit clothes or even cigarettes. But, you know, there's some of the rotten police who are protecting these people. So that's why we call upon the policemen in blue and policewomen in blue who are capable or want to resolve this crime. Do not attend those crime scenes without a proper search warrant and SARS custom officials. Because most of the time we know that when they conduct such operation, they'll receive a call and say, do you have a search warrant from the top officials? And once they don't have that, they tell them, leave the scene. You are not allowed to be there. And only to find out that the mastermind on their cell phone speed dial, they've got those officials under their pockets. So those men in blue and women who wants to do good, make sure you get a search warrant, make sure you call SARS custom so that you can root out this particular element of crime and human trafficking.
Mr. Rafadi, beyond an interview like this, how important is public awareness and education in really preventing human trafficking? Are there any standout campaigns that have worked very well, in your view?
Yes, there are. There are that we communicate with on certain social medias. There are NPCs, NPOs that constantly make awarenesses of such human trafficking, because it's really a problem, especially when it comes to our women and children. So that's why even us, you know, we call upon that do not shake hands with strangers in the malls. You might end up feeling dizzy or drowsy. Do not leave your drinks unattended, even when you are sitting with friends, because of once that happens, you can be, you know, easily pulled and be trafficked. Any job opportunities that you see, please verify it. Make sure you know people who have gone through that particular labor agent, especially the women who are, you know, into modeling and, you know, issues of in the restaurant, they want to be waitresses or chefs, because that is the most vulnerable place where these particular criminals, they take opportunities to human traffic our people.
And finally, what policy or even legislative changes would you suggest to really strengthen South Africa's fight against human trafficking?
I guess in South Africa, like I said, we need to look at the policies of asylum seekers, because that is another big ticket that this particular human traffickers, they come under. And Department of Labor, they constantly need to visit areas, workshops, spaza shops, supermarkets, to check who are these people who are operating. Because another issue or another factor is that most of them who are human trafficked, they come under cheap labor. But at the same time, more awarenesses need to be made, constantly series to be played, those who have fallen victim to make awarenesses so that the next victim doesn't fall into the same category or same trap of these perpetrators.
Crime expert Calvin Rafadi, thank you so much for joining us and shedding light on this critical issue, of course, concerning human trafficking.